What is up, YouTube Boxing family? It's Krod here. I'm back at it with another good video for you guys today. And yeah, let's get right into it. I wanted to talk about the story that I wanted to give you guys about a time in my life where I had dealt with a really bad sports injury, in which I think it's important to bring to the fight world. For those of you that don't know, I used to wrestle back in high school, and I only had 2 years worth of experience, and I was actually really, really good at it. And obviously, nowadays, I don't do sports because I didn't really continue it, as much, as I wanted to. In which I used to be really, really athletic and very skinny. I would even say, if I even wanted to continue wrestling in high school, it probably would have converted over to MMA or something to that level. But definitely boxing, really saved me. Well, I wouldn't say saved me, but it would definitely had enabled something out of me to be really good at that sport too. But either way, that's why that I'm trying to get back into, let the sport, whenever I do find time. But it's obviously hard because of the sport of boxing. Is very limited with like a lot of gyms depending on where you live. But yeah, definitely for my turning point. Like I definitely want to find me like a good gym to get myself back into. What I normally used to do back up in New York, but obviously out here in Florida, it's like a little bit different. But yeah, let's talk about my story with wrestling, and I think this is a very good story to give you guys as far as what I went through. I used to wrestle back in high school. I used to wrestle back up in upstate New York. If you guys don't know where that is in the upper region of New York. That is going away from New York City, heading into the Saratoga region or Albany region and Troy region. It's more of like the capital region. That's what people call it. It's a very tri-state area in which it has technically four major cities. I mean, if you want to, include Guilderland, but Guilderland, that's like technically outside of what the capital region, but people call it like that, like to which is weird. But yeah, you have Albany, Troy, Schenectady, you have Saratoga, but you have like your sub cities like like Latham, Clifton Park, or anywhere like that. But fast forward into what I'm talking about. I used to wrestle at Shenandoah High School, and it was a very pretty good school. I mean, as far as just like for like what the sports were, the sports were definitely really competitive, and you went up against some pretty good heavy loaded opposition. But as far as what I really wanted to do, I really wanted to get into basketball because I really love basketball, and that was like my very first ever favorite sport. But unfortunately, I was never selected because teammates were politically selected, and even if you were not that good yet and you still wanted to be a part of the team and become a part of something, you still weren't even selected. So I mean, it didn't really matter because I was naturally good at what I like to do. But I think what enabled me to become the warrior that I was when I did get into wrestling. And like I won't say like my coach's name, but the coach that introduced it, the sport to me, he said, hey, get into wrestling, try it out. And I was like, okay, yeah, sure, like I'll try it out because wrestling's like a cousin to boxing. It's like you see something that is like a power in front of you, and you don't know what this power is going to do to you until it changes you. And that's what I look at it with like a sport like wrestling and boxing or any combat sport. Like you see something that is like an essence coming out of it, and then if you're naturally connected to it, you actually become one with that sport. And it's like looking at like a spirit, and a spirit that talks to you but you can't see it. But obviously, I'm not talking religious here, but I'm just saying like in a more animistic worldview, like you understand that the natural essence of something that's in front of you, or just like the the force that gets something out of it, like that's what makes you motivated to do what you love to do. And that's where wrestling got birthed into my skill set. I was actually pretty good at coming into like my first year. I only did 2 years over at Shenandoah. Shenandoah is a really big school, at, like out of all of what the other schools in the capital region. But as far as like sports go, we were really, really good at a lot of sports. Basketball being one, football, baseball, I'm not so sure about soccer, but they definitely had their runs in soccer, but definitely football, baseball, basketball, and definitely wrestling. Wrestling, that was something that enabled me to do what I do, and honestly, like, I was actually good at it. And the thing was is that when I did get into it, there was a lot of great things that made me more motivated in the sport. And as I got better, my first year, like, I went like 9-3, and I did very very good. Like, I went up against some pretty good, decent level JV guys, in which I did JV out of my 2 years, but I did go up against former varsity, wrestlers that did JV, and I did go up against varsity guys in tournaments. So um, yeah, like, I was tested pretty, like, pretty hard, and I went up against some really heavy loaded opposition, and I would definitely say, as far as what I went through and what I sacrificed, I managed to go 27-3. I only got pinned, like, I think, like, what, two times. One out of, like, my actual school record for school matches, which is 27-3. But then if you want to add tournaments, I only got pinned like twice. But I mean, it's not like the end of the world, because pinning is, like, considered, like a knock, like, being knocked out in boxing, right? But people don't act like that. It's just like, you lose, you lose. But the good thing about wrestling is that it gives you a motivation to be better. And every time when I lost, I actually kept dominating my opposition, and I actually did, like, pretty well. I actually did what I had to do, and yeah, it was very very interesting. Even when I kept winning against my toughest matchups after I lost, I actually ended up seeing myself becoming a lot better than them, because styles make fights in boxing. Same thing in wrestling, styles make matches, and it's a very interesting ordeal of, like, what you go through to see what you want to do in the sport. But as far as my injury goes, I went through a really bad injury that I never noticed up until 2015, in which I had surgery for my left elbow. There was a tournament that I had gotten myself into before my second year was up. And, in New York, you always have, like, your, local tournaments before you get sent out to, like, regional tournaments within your state. And I was almost selected to, basically be invited to go to the invitational tournament, which there's a tournament out in Corinth, which they have an invitational tournament. But this tournament that I had in my second year, in which I was a senior, in which I did wrestling at the junior year in high school, and that's where I got introduced, to the sport, and then I was good at it, and then all the homies, showed up, for like my wrestling fights or matches, right? But yeah, shout out to everybody that knows, the days. But yeah, it was really ecstatic. I really got really good, and the sparring that I went through, it was very intense. I competed at heavyweight. I did 220 and 285. I could have really done 220, but I wasn't disciplined with, like, the weight cutting, and then I wasn't being smart. And in, like, my second year of, like, doing weight cutting, so like, my coach told me that I had to do 285 from now on, and I wasn't doing, like, I wasn't, whatchamacallit, I wasn't coming in at 285. I was actually, like, a very light, quick heavyweight, and I was really coming in at, like, 230, to 225 ish, and then maybe borderline 240 or 235. But moving forward with the wrestling match itself for the tournament where I got injured, I was doing really good in my career, and I was just about ready to finish up the, obviously, my season. And there was a really bad injury that I had went through in a semifinals or quarterfinals in a heavyweight tournament that is, obviously bracketized at the school that I had to compete at. I went to this school called Colony, which, that's part of, like, the capital region. But they had like a tournament held for, junior varsity level, tournaments that are local in the area. So I go out to these tournaments that your school sends you to, or you could, actually, well, I don't know, like most teams would usually come together, but if you can't be offered that, sometimes you have to go, by way of like your family member bringing you to the tournament. But obviously, it's all based off of like availability. So if you can't make it, then you can't make it. But for me, I was able to do, I forgot how many tournaments I did, but I know that I won first place in my very first ever JV tournament, and that was at Shenandoah, I believe. Actually, I think so. I think it was at Shen, or it was at Colony. But either way, I had a blast doing that. I came in first place, and that was a really good feeling. I obviously didn't go up against like the super duper tough opposition, but the competition got tougher as I started leveling up at other tournaments. Where we went up against schools like Wanta and all these other, top schools in the New York region. And by the way, New York is like one of the biggest areas in terms of having good wrestling. So for all the UFC fighters out there, you guys know what I'm talking about. But yes, New York is definitely one of the best hot zones when it comes to wrestling, as far as good talent, great MMA people, and a lot of great, athletes. Also, shout out to Dennis Bermudez. He came to my school, where he challenged all the best wrestlers out of like my team. Shout out to one of my former teammates, Nick Kelly. He used to be a former state champion, I believe back in 2012, if I'm not mistaken, or 2013. But either way, Nick Kelly, he was a beast. He did wrestling at Binghamton College, and unfortunately he got hurt, if I'm not mistaken. That's what I've heard from the last of him. But I hope everything's well with him. And shout out to everybody else. Shout out to Wesley. Shout out to David. Shout out to everybody. Shout out to everybody that I used to know. But yeah, it was some pretty sturdy competition. Like I went up against some actual killers, and for me, I was a really good southpaw type of grappler. I was a very good, lefty driven, wrestler with like a good style. That's why, like, when I did watch a lot of boxing, I like watching a lot of southpaws. And in the sport of wrestling, it still applies with boxing. You still have to have your stance, whether you're orthodox or southpaw, and you have to understand angles. You have to understand how you shoot, how you watch for the double leg takedown, or the single leg takedown, or the fireman's grab, or anything that you could think of. But you have to be really, really smart and meticulous with what you do. That's why, when I first got into like my first match, I was a little bit afraid, but then once I got into like the confidence of being like, okay, like I'm not like afraid of you now, like I'm ready to actually hurt you. That's when I started actually messing a lot of dudes up, and I wasn't really like afraid of anybody, because it's all mental. And in boxing, obviously that's way different. You're throwing a punch at somebody that you're never gonna meet again, most likely, but they're gonna punch you. So it's just like, that's a whole different story of you being mentally challenged, under the realm of being like, okay, this is something that's a little bit too much out of like my league, but I don't know if I could actually take it. But same thing in wrestling. Like you don't know what's gonna happen when someone slams you right onto the mat. But yeah, with my match, I went up against some fat kid that I had wrestled. I think he was out of Ravina, but he was not that good. He was okay, but he wasn't coming out of his way, just blowing through everyone out. Like he's very slow, and obviously the difference between 220 and 285 is like 285 is like the actual real super blobby heavyweight division, where you just see guys that are just so out of shape, and whoever's planting their fat in front of you to win wins. But it's mostly just strength, but it's really not. It's like, you still have to use technique, regardless of any weight class. But 220 heavyweight is like cruiserweight, but it's like the traditional heavyweight athletic division. And that's why that I like 220, because 220, that was like, those are like the real athletically cut guys. So I was doing 285 because obviously I moved up, because I didn't, I wasn't controlling like my discipline with like cutting weight. So like my coaches told me to do that, so I had no choice. But either way, when I did face this guy, he was pretty strong. He had some pretty good durable moves, but once I started to get into like the rhythm and I started to understand how to figure him out, and I actually broke his style. He was trying to act like he was better than me or tougher than me, but um, I I got tired like a little bit, and then some other exchanges like he got mad tired, but like I whipped him, and the thing was is that when I was in like the top position, which you have like a top and bottom position before you commence like a period in which that's like the round. I would say I'm not gonna say period because that sounds like a little bit weird and suspect, but yeah, it was during a certain round of the match, and he was on the bottom position and I was on the top leading position, where you have like one hand on the other arm, and it's just weird. Like I'm not gonna talk about that, but once that commenced, he put his weight onto my left elbow, and therefore my left elbow had been fractured. And what happens after that is that you have bones that are being cracked. And what happened out of that exchange, where he basically sprawled, or I wouldn't say sprawled, but he shot out of like my, out of my grapple, in which I was on like the top position, and I was trying to control, like the pace and trying to pin him, because that's what that's what you're supposed to do if you're trying to actually, take somebody out to make a statement on your opponent. But that's not always like the best case, so it's always best to kind of keep it to like a points level, because if you hit like the back of your opponent, you get 2 points. And if you're able to do that again while you get your opponent down on the ground, the referee can start accumulating more points. But then on top of that, there will be penalties where if you do something like foul or dirty, you will get like a point taken away. And you will be disqualified if you do go beyond overboard being stupid. But either way, I beat him. I won a decision, but my left elbow was all messed up, and unfortunately, I was not able to proceed on to the next round. I think we were in the semifinals or quarterfinals, but like I told like my coach, like, look, like I don't think I can continue, because my arm feels like it got injured. So therefore, he's like, okay, we're gonna have to try to hold this out, and yeah, I think I wasn't able to continue. Like I had something going on, but then I thought it was like nothing, but then I don't know, it was just it felt weird. And I knew that after I was done, which I really wanted to continue in wrestling, leading into other stuff, I knew that the injury got worse, and what happened was that I had a centimeter of bone that was stuck inside my left elbow. And what happens is that when you have a centimeter of bone that's stuck inside your elbow, that bone stays inside your elbow, creating a lot of deteriorated, internal bleeding. And in any form of medical terms, I would assume that will cause your arm to be infected. So I left that in there for 2 years. So I didn't know what the volatility would be of having that in there. But if you leave that in there, I know for a fact that you will most likely have your arm completely, infected. And if not, you probably would end up dying, or you would end up going through any motion of being infected throughout your body, because that's affecting your breathing, that's affecting your blood pattern or your bloodstream. So therefore, you go through a lot more risks of being injured again. And the thing about it is just that there's just more, I don't know, there's more risk of what you go through when you do injure your arm, because your arm is connected to your heart. So therefore your heart, whether if it's on like the left side, most likely, but guess what, like it's just like if you break a bone within that arm, that also ruins other parts of the body as well, as far as tendons, organs, and etc. But yeah, when I went through this was pretty scary. It wasn't something that I actually didn't know up until the doctor brought it up. And yeah, the doctor said, yeah, we have to take this out because if you leave it in there, you're going to end up going through a lot of different pains, and also your arm will most likely be infected, and you will most likely get sick, which will probably end up in possible death. So the problem was is just like understanding what was happening, because leaving that in there for 2 years is worse enough, where the injury itself could have been really horrible. But good enough, I got the situation fixed, and I had surgery on it. That was 2 years after, in 2015. I was actually 20 at the time. And yeah, here we are, fast forward later, 7 years later. Where, well, I would say what, 7 years? Yeah, 2013. That would be, yeah, 2020. Yeah, that would be 10 years later. I'm sorry. Yeah, because I was. Actually, no. No. 2015. Yeah. Yeah, like, it happened back in. Yeah, either way, like, you guys know what happened. It's most likely, 10, well, 8 years later. Yeah, 8 years later. But, yeah, either way, like, I had the surgery. Everything was taken care of. But the fact about the matter is that you should really watch out for your health, and definitely get checked up after you have a match. For any wrestlers or any boxers or professional fighters, always go to the doctor. That's what I think that's always best to do. But on top of that, this is just another clear example why you don't play wrestling. Wrestling is a very dangerous sport next to boxing, and yeah, like, I've seen people get messed up real bad, and people don't come out the same way, because what happens to your body is that you start going through a lot of wear and tear against a lot of guys that are more, vicious and more, destructive. So therefore, there's a lot more volatility in a match. But then again, it's the same thing in boxing. It's all about how you perform and how well you train. If you don't train good, and you don't come out, 100% guns blazing, then your body's going to go through more damage. But if you do train hard and you do prepare your body for the worst, yet to come, at least you're able to take some decent punishment. But it's always best to always, practice the fundamentals of hit and not get hit. Try to swim without getting wet. So, same thing in wrestling. I'm just happy that I came out really good, because I've had instances where guys try to slam me, and I could have felt like I could have been concussed and probably die, because you could easily kill somebody if you body slam them on the mat. Just saying. And it's dangerous, bro. It's like, people really want to take your head off. But it's like war. You have to really come out there with a killer mindset, and you can't be afraid. You cannot be afraid. When you get in there, you have to actually beat someone up and take them down. You can't let that person mentally destroy you. You can't say, oh no, like, I'm too afraid now. Like, you actually got to go out there and do it. So that's my words for what I have to say. But I figured I'd tell you guys that I do have, the holes drilled on my left part of my elbow, and the pain was really, like, it wasn't as bad, because I had everything drugged up when I did get out. But once I got out, oh man, the pain, taking all of those painkillers, once I felt it, like, it was terrible. And once I got better, I was just like, okay, yeah, it feels good, but my arm feels a little bit, weakish. But I think, like, honestly, naturally, that the stem cells are probably reproducing, a lot more. And knowing that I've had, the surgery since back in 2015 to have it, a lot has changed, and my arm does feel just as strong as, like, my right. But it's just that I have to be careful with how I position it, and just be careful. Don't do any crazy labor. But even in fighting terms, just keep doing like the same principled workouts, to be careful with, like, what I do, especially training wise, or just doing anything if I ever do boxing. But trainings or something like that. But either way, that's, like, my story. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you guys think. And yeah, man, you don't play wrestling. This is, like, another clear example, like, that people should definitely look at and definitely share with others. But I figured I'd share my story, so therefore everyone knows that it's not to be played around. So, alright, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Peace out. And salute to the mighty TWT LDBC family. I'll see you guys later. Peace out. And I'm out. Peace.